I always knew Diane, my mother-in-law, didn't like me, but I never thought she'd try to drug me. That night started like any other strange family dinner at her pristine colonial home in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was running on fumes after a brutal week photographing elk in the snowy mountains of Montana, barely home long enough to drop my bags before Haley insisted we had to attend her mom's birthday dinner. Just a couple hours, she promised. I should have listened to my gut. As I stepped into the kitchen to help Diane carry her famous sangria, I caught a glimpse of her pouring something from a small, clear vial into one of the glasses. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned and smiled too sweetly. "Special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law," she chirped. I forced a smile, heart racing, and casually swapped glasses when she wasn't looking. The one she tampered with? I handed it to her husband, Robert, a smug investment banker who never passed up a chance to belittle my career as a wildlife photographer. He drank it without hesitation. 45 minutes later, Robert was violently sick. Pale, sweating, and stumbling to the bathroom while Diane's face lost all color. She looked at me across the table, and in that moment, we both knew the truth. She had tried to poison me, and I'd caught her. I didn't say a word. I just ate my dessert in silence while Haley rushed after her father. My blood was ice cold, not from fear, but from a slow-burning fury. This wasn't just about me or my career. It was about control. Power. And I wasn't going to fight her the way she expected. I wasn't going to yell or accuse. I was going to expose her, piece by piece, with evidence, not emotion. I was done playing nice. In the days following the dinner, the tension in our marriage thickened like smoke. Haley didn't suspect anything, at least not consciously. She thought her father had a bad oyster or some vague stomach bug, and Diane, ever the actress, played the role of concerned wife with practiced ease. But every time I looked at her, I saw it, the flicker of panic behind her eyes. She knew I knew. And now it was a waiting game. I started keeping notes. Photos. Voice recordings. Subtle but damning. I found the empty vial in the trash the next day when I forgot my scarf at her house and doubled back. It still smelled faintly of something bitter. My hands shook as I dropped it into a Ziploc bag. It wasn't just about what she'd done, it was the message she was sending: you don't belong here. You're not one of us. And I will do whatever it takes to get rid of you. Haley, meanwhile, was slipping away from me. Her moods grew unpredictable. She became defensive over the smallest things, like where I'd been, who I'd spoken to, why I seemed paranoid. At first, I blamed the stress of family pressure, or maybe residual guilt from how tired I'd been lately. But something didn't add up. I'd find myself groggy for no reason, my camera misplaced, memory fuzzy in patches. And then I realized, Diane wasn't just targeting me physically. She was working on Haley too, from the inside out. It became clear during a conversation I'll never forget. Haley had just snapped at me for suggesting we skip another dinner with her parents. She paused mid-sentence, eyes glazed, and said, almost robotically, "You've been distant. Mom says maybe you're depressed again." Again? I'd never told Diane about my therapy sessions from years ago. Only Haley knew. That's when I knew Diane was poisoning more than my drink. She was poisoning my marriage, drop by drop, through whispers and doubt and twisted truths. That night, I sat alone in my darkroom, staring at a developing photo of Diane's hands holding that sangria glass. My pulse was steady now. I wasn't just documenting wildlife anymore. I was documenting a war. And I was done being hunted. The morning after that realization, I called in sick. Not to avoid work, but to reclaim my mind. I started digging deeper, retracing everything. I reviewed my photo logs, checked my timestamps, even backtracked the locations of where I'd been versus what I remembered. And that's when I noticed it: gaps. Whole afternoons blurred out. A shoot I supposedly canceled, yet the invoice had been filed. A gas receipt from a town I didn't remember visiting. I wasn't just being manipulated, I was being drugged. I booked a private toxicology screening. Paid in cash. Told no one. When the results came back a week later, my stomach dropped. Trace amounts of lorazepam. Repeated exposure. Small doses, easily hidden in food or drink, enough to cause confusion, drowsiness, disorientation. Enough to make someone look unstable. Someone was trying to build a case against me, slowly, carefully. And Haley? She was drifting further. Cold one day, affectionate the next. I started to catch her saying things that weren't her, language that echoed Diane almost word for word. Maybe you're not well right now. You're isolating yourself. You push people away. Classic gaslighting lines, slipped in with concern. Haley had become a mirror reflecting someone else's script. So I started documenting her too, not to blame, but to protect the truth. I hid a small camera in my darkroom, another in my studio. I began journaling everything, timestamping my memory before someone else could rewrite it. One night, I heard Haley on the phone. Her voice was hushed, but I heard Diane's name. I don't know, Mom, maybe he really is losing it. That was the crack that broke me. Not because she said it, but because she believed it. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the footage from the last family dinner over and over. The way Diane hovered over me. The refill she insisted on pouring. The moment Haley looked away and Diane's smile shifted, something cold, triumphant. They weren't just trying to sabotage my marriage. They were trying to erase me. But they'd underestimated one thing: I was a photographer. I noticed everything. I captured everything. And now, I was ready to expose the truth, even if I had to burn down every frame to do it. I didn't confront Haley right away. I wanted to, but I knew if I accused her now, with nothing but words, I'd play right into their hands. That's what Diane was counting on: an outburst, a breakdown, something that could be twisted into proof of instability. So I stayed quiet. And I watched. I kept recording every conversation, every moment that felt off. It became a lonely kind of obsession, paranoia with a purpose. But beneath it, grief churned. Grief for the woman I married. Grief for the version of me she once believed in. And anger, deep, coiled anger, at how expertly Diane had poisoned the well between us. Then came the slip-up. It was a Tuesday night. Haley had just gotten back from her yoga class. She seemed distracted, jittery, said she was tired and going to bed early. An hour later, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while she slept. The name on the screen, Dr. L. I wasn't proud of it, but I opened her messages. What I found stunned me. Conversations between Diane and some psychiatrist. Messages forwarded to Haley. A plan. Frame the dissociation as early signs of delusional disorder. Push for voluntary evaluation. There was even talk of guardianship. They were preparing to have me committed. It was no longer just gaslighting. This was a full psychological takedown. I copied everything. The messages, the call logs, the files. I made multiple backups: cloud, hard drive, encrypted USB. I needed leverage. I needed time. And I needed someone on my side. That's when I reached out to Marissa, Haley's old college roommate, a therapist. Someone Haley once trusted, someone Diane hated. I told her everything. I showed her the footage, the test results, the messages. She didn't say much at first, just watched, listened, eyes narrowing. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, but steady. Julian, you're not crazy. You're being targeted. But if you want to get out of this intact, you have to play smarter than they ever imagined. I nodded, heart pounding. The war had started quietly. But now, I was no longer a casualty. I was preparing for battle. The hardest part wasn't gathering evidence. It was pretending. Pretending I hadn't read the messages. Pretending I still trusted Haley. Pretending Diane's claws hadn't already drawn blood. But Marissa was right. If I wanted to beat them, I had to be strategic. Emotional reactions would only feed their narrative. So I played the part. I smiled. I thanked Diane for her lasagna. I let Haley kiss me goodnight without flinching. Behind closed doors, though, I worked. Marissa put me in touch with a lawyer, someone familiar with psychological coercion cases. We started building a timeline, documenting the patterns, the isolation, the medication changes, the altered narratives. She advised me to stay in the house for now, not because it was safe, but because leaving could be used against me. Diane's need for control would be her undoing. She couldn't help but overplay her hand. A week later, she accidentally left a folder on our kitchen counter, medical pamphlets, notes from a psychiatrist, and a list of inpatient facilities. It was bait. And I took it. I told her I'd been feeling off, maybe a little confused, even overwhelmed. Her eyes lit up like a shark smelling blood. "I'm so glad you're being honest," she purred. "We've all been so worried." She arranged an appointment with her hand-picked psychiatrist. I agreed. I needed to see how far they'd go. The session was a farce. The doctor barely listened. He asked vague questions and scribbled notes without looking at me. I spoke carefully, honestly, but I could tell my words were being twisted into pathology. What they didn't know. I had a hidden recorder in my pocket. Afterwards, I sent the audio to my lawyer. We now had proof, a manipulated evaluation attempt, a clear breach of ethics. Meanwhile, I dug deeper into Diane's history. Marissa helped me uncover a trail, 2 previous restraining orders filed by other family members, 1 sealed case involving a former caregiver. Patterns of control, coercion, emotional abuse. Diane wasn't new to this game. She was a seasoned predator. But this time, she'd picked the wrong target. Now, I wasn't just defending myself. I was building the case to take them all down and rescue what was left of the woman I loved. Truth doesn't always explode, it seeps in, slow and undeniable. And with every new piece of evidence, every careful step, the illusion Diane had built began to crack. I started with subtle shifts. Quiet moments where I'd say something Haley couldn't ignore. "Do you remember how we used to laugh for hours in our old apartment? Before we moved back here?" Sometimes she'd pause, eyes flickering with something, hesitation, confusion, maybe recognition. Other times, she shut down completely. "Don't start with that again, Julian," she'd mutter, and Diane would conveniently appear with tea, eyes watching me like a hawk. But the cracks were there. With my lawyer's help, I filed for a motion to protect my medical autonomy. The audio recordings, the planted documents, and Diane's pattern of controlling behavior were building a case of undue influence. It would take time, but the courts were listening. Then, one night, everything shifted. Haley found the recorder. I'd hidden it in a book spine on our shelf, and she stumbled across it looking for an old journal. She came to me with the device in her hand, face pale, voice trembling. "Julian, what is this?" I didn't lie. I told her everything, the folder, the psychiatrist, the manipulation. I showed her the audio. I showed her the file Marissa and I had compiled, names, dates, sealed reports. I expected rage, maybe betrayal. What I didn't expect was silence. Deep, haunted silence. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." That was the first real thing she'd said in months. It broke me, and it gave me hope. Haley began to ask questions. She started spending more time alone, away from her mother. I saw her journaling again. She even contacted her old therapist, someone Diane had smeared as dangerous years ago. Of course, Diane noticed. She tightened her grip, growing colder, more invasive. But it was too late. Haley was beginning to see. This wasn't over. But for the first time, I wasn't alone in the fight. And neither was she. The day Haley stood up to her parents for the first time was a turning point, but not one that came easily. For weeks, I'd watched her wrestle with the truth, unsure of how to process the world-shattering realization that her parents, her protectors, her foundation, had been the very source of her pain. I could see the way her eyes would cloud over when she sat with them, her smile strained as she tried to balance the life she had with me and the family she had been born into. But then, one evening, she came to me with her hands shaking and her voice strong. "I'm done, Julian. They don't get to do this anymore. Not to me, and not to us." My heart swelled with pride as I saw her, finally standing on her own, free from the invisible chains Diane had wrapped around her for so many years. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for us, for our future. The woman I had fallen in love with was back, the woman who could see through the lies, who wasn't afraid to break free from the mold they'd cast her into. That night, Haley and I sat down together, our backs straight, our hands interlocked. We made plans for how we would confront Diane and Gerald. We knew this wasn't just a battle for our marriage, but a battle for Haley's sense of self. It wasn't going to be easy. We had to do this carefully, without giving them the upper hand. The next day, we walked into Gerald and Diane's house, but the air felt different. The weight of all the unspoken history between us hung heavy, but now there was no fear, no hesitation. We were no longer the victims in their twisted game. Haley's voice, steady and unwavering, broke the silence. "We're done with this. We're done with the control, the lies, and the manipulation. You don't get to do this to me anymore." Diane's eyes flared with fury, but she didn't have the power she once did. This time, Haley wasn't going to bend to their will. And this time, I wasn't going to stand silently by. "I know what you've been doing," I said, pulling out the evidence, everything. The toxicology reports, the prescription records, the footage. It was all there. Gerald and Diane's faces turned ashen, the truth finally crashing down on them. "You won't win this," Diane hissed, but her voice lacked conviction. She knew it was over. For the first time, I felt the walls of manipulation begin to crumble. The confrontation had been brutal, but it was necessary. Once the truth was out in the open, the weight of everything that had been hidden for so long came crashing down on Haley. I saw the emotional toll it took on her, the way her shoulders seemed to sag under the burden of years of manipulation. But through the tears and the anger, I also saw something else, the beginning of her healing. The walls she had built around herself for so long started to crumble, brick by brick, and she was finally letting herself breathe. Haley spent the next few days in silence, processing the trauma. I gave her space, knowing she needed it, but I also stood by her side, patient, steady. There was no rushing this. The damage her parents had done couldn't be undone overnight. But as the days passed, I saw glimpses of the woman she had been before the weight of her parents' control had worn her down. The woman who loved fiercely, who fought for what was hers, who wasn't afraid to trust her instincts. One evening, after a particularly quiet day, she turned to me, her face a mixture of sadness and strength. "I thought I knew what love was," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I never realized how much of it was twisted, controlled. I thought they were protecting me. But they were just trying to own me." I held her, understanding now just how deeply this betrayal cut. Her parents had painted their control as love, as concern. And for so long, she had believed them. But now, she saw the truth. And with that truth came power, the power to choose, the power to break free. "I love you, Julian," she continued, her voice stronger this time. "And I'm done with them. I'm done letting them dictate my life. I kissed her forehead, relieved. She had made the hardest decision of her life, but it was the right one. The next step was clear: we would rebuild. Together. The following weeks were a blur of therapy sessions, quiet conversations, and difficult realizations. Haley began to reclaim her life, piece by piece. And as her strength returned, so did mine. We were no longer afraid. Our future was ours to shape, and we were determined to do so on our own terms. It wasn't easy. The road ahead was still filled with obstacles, but we were ready. Ready to face the world as a united front, no longer controlled by the toxic grip of her parents. We had each other, and that was all we needed. The next few months tested us in ways we hadn't anticipated. Though Haley had taken the brave step to cut ties with her family, the aftermath was anything but simple. Her parents, unable to accept that their control was slipping away, began to manipulate her in new, more subtle ways. They reached out, trying to guilt-trip her, planting seeds of doubt in her mind. "We only want what's best for you," her mother would say, her voice full of feigned sorrow. "Why are you pushing us away?" It hurt me to see Haley struggle, to witness her battle with the guilt that had been instilled in her for so long. She had always been a dutiful daughter, never questioning their motives. Now, with the ties severed, it was as if she was floating in uncharted waters, unsure of who she was without their influence. But I saw the change in her. A strength that had once been buried deep beneath years of manipulation was now surfacing. There were moments, though, when the weight of the past threatened to pull her back. On some nights, I would find her staring blankly into space, the shadows of her past creeping back into her thoughts. And yet, with every struggle, I saw her begin to heal just a little more. It wasn't immediate, but I could see the gradual shift in her confidence, the way she no longer looked to her parents for validation, and the way she started to trust herself again. One evening, she came to me, her eyes bright but serious. "Julian, I've realized something," she said. This fight isn't just about them anymore. It's about me. And about us." Her voice was steady, filled with a newfound conviction. "I can't change the past, but I can choose the future. And I want to build a life with you. A real one." The words were everything I needed to hear. I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her resolve. "We're in this together," I whispered. "We'll face whatever comes, and we'll do it side by side." In that moment, I knew we had reached a turning point. The road ahead would be challenging, but we were no longer fighting alone. We had each other, and together, we would forge a future free from the toxic grip of her past. Sometimes, in order to heal, we must confront painful pasts and accept that not everyone will support the path we choose. Haley struggled with complex emotions, from her love for her family to the guilt she felt in cutting ties with her parents. However, she realized that freeing herself from negative influence was necessary to build a new life. Remember, letting go is not a sign of weakness, it's the first step in creating a stronger and more liberated future.